Dear students, hope you are well and doing great. The video on this topic, biogeochemical cycle, contain instructive and educational content that is both shareable and easy to retain. So let's start. Here we will discuss what is biogeochemical cycle, second is types of biogeochemical cycle, third is nitrogen cycle, fourth is carbon cycle, fifth is oxygen cycle, sixth is water cycle, seventh is phosphorus cycle, eighth is sulfur cycle, ninth is human impact on biogeochemical cycle, 10th is importance of biogeochemical cycles. What is biogeochemical cycle? The term biogeochemical cycle is a contraction that refers to the consideration of the biological, geological, and chemical aspects of each cycle. Biogeochemical cycle mainly refers to the movement of nutrients and other elements between biotic and abiotic factors. Any of the natural pathway by which essential elements of living matter are circulated called biogeochemical cycle. The term biogeochemical is derived from bio meaning biosphere, geo meaning geological components like rocks, soil, air and water, and the chemical meaning the elements that move through cycle. The matters on earth is conserved and present in the form of atoms, since matter can either be created nor destroyed. It is recycled in the earth system in various forms. The earth obtains energy from the sun, which is radiated back as heat. Rest all other elements are present in a closed system. The major elements include carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. These elements are recycled through the biotic and abiotic components of the ecosystem. The atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere are the abiotic components of the ecosystem. Types of biogeochemical cycle. Biogeochemical cycles basically divided into two types, gaseous cycle and sedimentary cycle. Gaseous cycle. The term gaseous cycle refers to the transformation of gases between various biogeochemical reservoirs like hydrosphere, atmosphere, and biosphere. The important gaseous cycles are nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, and water cycles. The second is sedimentary cycle. The sedimentary cycle includes the leaching of minerals and salt from the earth's crust, which they settle as sediments or rock before the cycle repeats. Important sedimentary cycles are phosphorus, sulfur, and rock cycle. The first is nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen cycle complete in 5 steps: nitrogen fixation, nitrification, assimilation, ammonification, and denitrification. First is nitrogen fixation. Atmospheric nitrogen cannot be used by plants and animals directly. यानी कि जो नाइट्रोजन है वो प्लांट्स और एनिमल्स वो डायरेक्टली इसे इस्तेमाल नहीं कर सकते और इसे नाइट्रोजन कंपाउंड्स में कन्वर्ट करना ज़रूरी होता है. यानी कि जो नाइट्रोजन इन द प्रेजेंस ऑफ डाई एजोट्रोफ्स एंड राइजोबियम बैक्टीरिया फॉर्म्स द अमोनिया and ammonium. The second is nitrification. Some nitrifying bacteria convert ammonia into nitrite and then into nitrate because ammonia is highly toxic for some. यानी कि नाइट्रोजन को कुछ नाइट्रीफाइंग बैक्टीरिया होते हैं जो कि नाइट्रोजन को नाइट्राइट और फिर नाइट्रेट में कन्वर्ट कर देते हैं क्योंकि जो अमोनिया है वो हाईली टॉक्सिक है. इस वजह से अमोनिया को नाइट्राइट और नाइट्रेट में कन्वर्ट कर देते हैं ताकि वो उन्हें इस्तेमाल कर सकें. और इनमें जो बैक्टीरिया होते हैं जो कन्वर्ट करते हैं वो होते हैं नाइट्रोसोमोनास एंड नाइट्रोबैक्टर. The third is assimilation. Nitrogen compounds in various forms such as ammonia, nitrate, nitrite are taken up from soil by plants which are then used to form plant and animal protein. यानी कि जो अमोनिया नाइट्राइट एंड नाइट्रेट जो एलिमेंट्स हैं इन्हें जो प्लांट्स होते हैं वो सॉइल से निकाल लेते हैं और उन्हें प्लांट और एनिमल प्रोटीन बनाने के लिए इस्तेमाल करते हैं. नेक्स्ट इज़ अमोनिफिकेशन. डेड प्लांट एंड एनिमल्स और देयर वेस्ट कंटेन्स ऑर्गेनिक नाइट्रोजन कंपाउंड विच व्हेन एंटर्स इनटू द सॉइल फंजाई और बैक्टीरिया कन्वर्ट इट बैक to ammonia. यानी कि जब प्लांट्स और एनिमल्स मर जाते हैं तो उनका जो वेस्ट होता है उनके पास नाइट्रोजन कंपाउंड्स मौजूद होते हैं। वो नाइट्रोजन कंपाउंड्स को फंजाई या बैक्टीरिया उन्हें अमोनिया में दोबारा कन्वर्ट कर देते हैं ताकि दोबारा से इसे इस्तेमाल किया जा सके। द फिफ्थ इज डिनाइट्रिफिकेशन। इन दिस प्रोसेस नाइट्रेट इज कन्वर्ट बैक इनटू गैसेस नाइट्रोजन। डिनाइट्रीफाइंग बैक्टीरिया यूज ऑक्सीजन ऑफ नाइट्रेट्स इन एन एरोबिक कंडीशन। इस प्रोसेस में जो नाइट्रेट होती है वो वापस नाइट्रोजन में गैसेस नाइट्रोजन में कन्वर्ट हो जाती है। द नेक्स्ट इज कार्बन साइकिल। वन ऑफ द मोस्ट important biogeochemical cycle is carbon cycle. Photosynthesis and respiration are important partners. While consumers emit carbon dioxide, producers process this carbon dioxide to form oxygen. Carbon cycle describes the process in which carbon atoms continually travel from the atmosphere to the earth. जो कार्बन साइकिल है वो दो साइकिल्स में पार्ट्स में डिवाइड है, biological carbon cycle and geological carbon cycle. The first is biological carbon cycle. This cycle starts with the autotrophs through the process of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a process in which green plants use the energy from the sun to make carbohydrates from carbon dioxide and water in the presence of chlorophyll. Then the photosynthesis convert carbon dioxide from the atmosphere or dissolved in water into glucose molecules. Then these glucose molecules are either converted into other substances or used to provide energy for the synthesis of other biologically important molecules. The second point is carbon moves from plants to animal through food chains. Carbon present in plants move to animals that eat them. Animals that eat other animals get the carbon from their food too. इट्स मीन कि एक फूड चेन है जिसमें प्लांट्स कार्बन को लेते हैं, फिर वो प्लांट्स जो एनिमल्स हैं वो प्लांट्स को खाते हैं, प्राइमरी एनिमल्स प्लांट्स को खाते हैं, जो फिर सेकेंडरी एनिमल्स हैं वो प्राइमरी एनिमल्स को खाते हैं, और इस तरह कार्बन प्लांट से प्राइमरी एनिमल से सेकेंडरी एनिमल के पास चली जाती है और ये मूव ऑन होती रहती है. The third point is glucose provides energy to living things through respiration. Where carbon dioxide formed, this carbon dioxide then goes back into the atmosphere. Dead and decaying organisms also release carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Next is geological cycle. The first point is carbon moves from atmosphere to oceans. The oceans and other bodies of water absorb some carbon from the atmosphere. The carbon is dissolved into the water. It's mean जो वाटर बॉडीज़ होती हैं वो एटमॉस्फेयर से कार्बन को एब्जॉर्ब करती हैं और उसे पानी में डिजॉल्व कर देती हैं. द सेकेंड पॉइंट इज एटमॉस्फेरिक कार्बन कंबाइंस विद वाटर ऑफ रेन टू फॉर्म अ वीक एसिड, कार्बोनिक एसिड, दैट फॉल्स ऑन द रॉक. जो एटमॉस्फेरिक कार्बन होती है वो वाटर के साथ, जो बारिश का पानी होता है उसके साथ मिलकर कार्बोनिक एसिड बनाती है और पत्थरों पर गिरती है, रॉक्स पर वगैरह गिरती है. द एसिड डिजॉल्व्स रॉक्स, अ प्रोसेस कॉल्ड केमिकल वेदरिंग. केमिकल वेदरिंग का प्रोसेस है जिसमें जो एसिड है वो रॉक्स को डिजॉल्व कर देता है और रिलीज़ करता है कैल्शियम, मैग्नीशियम, पोटाशियम, सोडियम आयंस. रिवर्स कैरी द आयंस टू द ओशंस. जो दरिया हैं फिर वो उन आयंस को समंदर की तरफ ले जाते हैं. इन द ओशंस द कैल्शियम आयंस कंबाइन विद बाइकार्बोनेट आयंस टू फॉर्म कैल्शियम कार्बोनेट, अ की कंपोनेंट ऑफ द शेल ऑफ मैरीन ऑर्गेनिजम्स. यानी कि जो ओशंस हैं इनमें जो कैल्शियम आयंस होते हैं जो कि दरिया से समंदर की तरफ गए हैं वो कार्बोनेट के साथ मिल जाते हैं और बनाते हैं कैल्शियम कार्बोनेट. और कैल्शियम कार्बोनेट एक की कंपोनेंट है मेरीन ऑर्गेनिजम्स का शेल बनाने के लिए, सच एज मोलस्क वगैरह. When these organisms die, their remains may sink and eventually becomes part of the sediment on the ocean's floor. Over geologic time, The sediment turned into limestone, which is the largest carbon reservoir on earth. जब ऑर्गेनिजम्स मर जाते हैं तो उनका जो बकिया चीज़ें होती हैं, जो उनके रिमेन्स होते हैं, वो समंदर की तह में जाकर लग जाते हैं और समंदर का हिस्सा बन जाते हैं और सेडिमेंट्स बना देते हैं। और जो सेडिमेंट्स होते हैं वो लाइमस्टोन में बदल जाते हैं और जो सेडिमेंट्स हैं वो लाइमस्टोन में बदल जाते हैं और जो लाइमस्टोन है वो सबसे लार्जेस्ट कार्बन रिजर्वियर है। द नेक्स्ट पॉइंट इज सबडक्शन एंड वोल्केनिक इरप्शन. When one tectonic plate moves beneath another tectonic plate, their rocks of limestone enter into the deeper section of the earth. Due to very high temperature, the rocks melt and carbon dioxide is again released through volcanic eruptions. यानी कि जब टेक्टोनिक प्लेट्स एक टेक्टोनिक प्लेट दूसरी टेक्टोनिक प्लेट के नीचे उनके नीचे नीचे मूव्स करती जाती हैं, तो ये जो लाइमस्टोन की रॉक्स होती हैं वो ज़मीन के नीचे वाले सेक्शन में मूव कर जाती हैं, एंटर हो जाती हैं। और जो ज़मीन का निचला हिस्सा है वहाँ टेम्परेचर ज़्यादा होने की वजह से ये मेल्ट हो जाते हैं और जो कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड होती है वो अगेन रिलीज हो जाती है वोल्केनिक इरप्शंस के ज़रिए। The next point is exchange. The carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and carbon dioxide dissolved in water are constantly exchanged. The next point is extraction. When plants and animals die, their bodies and wood and leaves decays, bringing the carbon into the ground. Some is buried and will become fossil fuels in millions and millions of years. Carbon moves from fossil fuels to the atmosphere. When fuels are burned, when humans burn fossil fuel to power factories, power plant, cars and trucks, most of the carbon quickly enter the atmosphere as carbon dioxide gas. Each year, 5.5 billion tons of carbon is released by burning fossil fuels. Of this massive amount, 3.3 million tons stays in the atmosphere. Most of the remainder becomes dissolved in seawater. This cycle completes in millions of years. Importance of carbon cycle is the carbon cycle is an important aspect of the survival of all life on earth. From an environment perspective, carbon provides insulation by trapping the sun's heat. From a biological perspective, carbon is the building block of life and forms stable bonds with other elements necessary for life. The next cycle is oxygen cycle. Oxygen cycle is a circulation of oxygen in various forms through nature. The first point is photosynthesis. Plants release oxygen into the atmosphere as a byproduct of photosynthesis. The photosynthesis is a process in which green plants use the energy from the sun to make carbohydrates from carbon dioxide and water in the presence of chlorophyll. Plants pull the carbon from carbon dioxide and use carbon in glucose, and then release oxygen into the atmosphere as a byproduct of photosynthesis. The next point is respiration. The oxygen that is released by plant is used by humans, animals and other organisms for respiration. For example, breathing. We use oxygen to break down simple sugars and generate energy to sustain ourselves. During respiration, organisms take in oxygen. Organisms take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide into air. इट्स मीन इन द प्रोसेस ऑफ रेस्पायरेशन जो ऑर्गेनिजम्स होते हैं वो ऑक्सीजन को टेक इन करते हैं और कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड को बाहर निकाल देते हैं. द नेक्स्ट पॉइंट इज कंबस्टन. आवर कार्स यूज कार्बन इन द फॉर्म ऑफ फॉसिल फ्यूल्स and carbon is also a pollutant as carbon dioxide. We extracting fossil fuels, combustion involves burning them to produce energy. But a byproduct of combustion is that it releases carbon dioxide back into atmosphere, and too much carbon dioxide increases the greenhouse effect. The next point is decomposition. Decomposition is another process in which oxygen is required. When an organism dies, The dead animals or plants decay into the ground, and the organic matter along with the carbon, oxygen, water and other components are returned back into the soil and air. This process is carried out by fungi, bacteria and some insects. The entire process requires oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. Here is the four diagrams for the photosynthesis, respiration, combustion and decomposition. We can also understand by these diagrams. The next cycle is water cycle. Water cycle. Water cycles have 7 steps: evaporation, condensation, sublimation, precipitation, transpiration, runoff, and infiltration. In the first step, evaporation, water cycle start with evaporation. It is a process where water at the surface turns into water vapor. Water absorbs heat energy from the sun and turn into vapors. Water bodies like oceans, the seas, the lakes, and the river bodies are the main source of evaporation. Through evaporation, water moves from hydrosphere to atmosphere. As water evaporates, it reduces the temperature of the bodies. इट्स मीन कि इवेपोरेशन में जो वाटर होता है वो हीट एनर्जी को एब्जॉर्ब करता है सन से और वेपर्स में तब्दील हो जाता है। और इसके जो मेन सोर्स हैं वो लेक्स हैं, सीज हैं, ओकियंस हैं, वाटर बॉडीज़ हैं, रिवर बॉडीज़ हैं। द नेक्स्ट स्टेप इज़ कंडेंसेशन. एज वाटर वेपोराइजेज as water vaporizes into water vapor, it rises up in the atmosphere. At high altitude, the water vapors changes into very tiny particles of ice or water droplets. Because the temperature at high altitude is low, this process is called condensation. These particles come close together and form clouds and fogs in the sky. इन द प्रोसेस ऑफ कंडेंसेशन तो वाटर है वेपोराइज होता है, वेपोराइज होकर एटमॉस्फेयर में चला जाता है और सबसे ऊपर हाई एल्टीट्यूड होने की वजह से जो ड्रॉपलेट वेपर्स हैं, वाटर वेपर्स हैं, वो टाइनी पार्टिकल्स ऑफ आइस और वाटर ड्रॉपलेट्स में चेंज हो जाते हैं क्योंकि पानी का जो ऊपर टेम्परेचर होता है हाई एल्टीट्यूड वो बहुत लो होता है और इसे कहते हैं कंडेंसेशन. The next step is sublimation. Apart from evaporation, sublimation also contributes to water vapors in the air. Sublimation is a process where ice directly converts into water vapor without converting into liquid water. This phenomena accelerates when the temperature is low or pressure is high. The main source of water from sublimation are the ice sheets of North Pole, the South Pole, and the ice caps on the main mountains. Sublimation is a rather slower process than evaporation. The next step is precipitation. In this process, the clouds condensed water vapors then pour down as precipitation due to wind or temperature change. This occurs because the water droplets combine to make bigger droplets. Also, when the air cannot hold any more water, it precipitates. At high altitude, the temperature is low and hence the droplets lose their heat energy. Their water droplets fall down as rain. If the temperature is very low, the water droplets fall as snow. Water also precipitate in the form of drizzle, sleet, and hail. Hence, water enters lithosphere. The next step is transpiration. As water precipitates, some of it is absorbed by the soil. This water enters into the process of transpiration. The transpiration is a process similar to evaporation where liquid water is turned into water vapor by plant. इसके बाद जो पौधे की जड़ें होती हैं वो पानी को जज़ब करती हैं और इसे पत्तियों की तरफ धकेल देती हैं जहाँ ये फोटोसिंथेसिस के लिए फिर इस्तेमाल होते हैं. और जो अज़ाफ़ी पानी होता है वो पत्तियों से स्टोमेटा के ज़रिए पानी के बुखारात के तौर पर मुंतकिल होता है. इस तरह पानी बायोस्फीयर में दाखिल होता है. and exist into gaseous phase. The next step is runoff. It is a process where water runs over the surface of earth. When the snow melts into water, it also leads to runoff. As water runs over the ground, it displaces the topsoil with it and displaces the topsoil with it and moves the mineral along with the streams. This runoff combines to form channels and their rivers and ends up into lakes, seas, and oceans. Here the water enters hydrosphere. The next step is infiltration. Some of the water that precipitated does not run off into the river and is absorbed by plants or get evaporated. It moves deep into the soil. This is called infiltration. The water seeps down and increases the level of groundwater table. It is called pure water and is drinkable. Infiltration is measured as inches of water soaked by the soil per hour. The next cycle is phosphorus cycle. The steps of phosphorus cycles are weathering, absorption by plants, absorption by animals, return to the environment through decomposition. Phosphorus is a biological process that involves the movement of phosphorus through the lithosphere, hydrosphere, and biosphere. It is an important element for all living animals. It forms a significant part of the structural framework of DNA and RNA. They are also an important component of ATP. Humans contain 80% of phosphorus in teeth and bones. Phosphorus cycle is a very slow process. Phosphorus is absorbed by organic matter in the soil, which is used for various biological processes. The first step of phosphorus cycle is weathering. Phosphorus is found in the rocks in abundance. That is why the phosphorus cycle starts in Earth's crust. The phosphate salts are broken down from the rocks, and these salts are washed away into the ground where they mix in the soil. The next step is absorption by plants. Phosphate salt dissolved in water are absorbed by plants. However, the amount of phosphorus present in the soil is very less. That is why the farmers apply phosphate fertilizer on agriculture land. The aquatic plant absorb inorganic phosphorus from layers of water bodies. Since phosphate salts do not dissolve in water properly, they affect plant growth in aquatic ecosystem. The next step is absorption by animals. The animal absorb phosphorus from the plants or by consuming plant eating animals. The rate of the phosphorus cycle is faster in plants and animals when compared to rocks. Next step is return to the environment through decomposition. When plants and animals die, they are decomposed by microorganisms. During this process, the organic form of phosphorus is converted into the organic form, which is recycled to soil and water. Soil and water will end up in sediments and rock, which will again release phosphorus by weathering. Thus, phosphorus cycle start over. There are many human impacts on phosphorus cycle. A number of human activities use of fertilizers has a great impact on the phosphorus cycle. The phosphorus fertilizers increase the level of phosphorus in the soil. Overuse of these fertilizers reduce the fertility of the soil and is also harmful to the microorganisms present in the soil. When these are washed away into the nearby water bodies, they are hazardous to aquatic life. Next cycle is sulfur cycle. Sulfur cycle. The steps of sulfur cycle are mineralization, oxidation, reduction, and incorporation. In the mineralization of organic sulfur into inorganic forms such as hydrogen sulfide H2S elements sulfur as well as sulfide minerals. The next is oxidation. Oxidation of hydrogen sulfide and elemental sulfur to sulfate. The third is reduction of sulfate to sulfide. The fourth step is incorporation of sulfide into organic compounds including metal containing derivatives. Sulfur cycle is collection of processes by which sulfur moves between rocks, waterways, and living systems. Such biogeochemical cycles are important in geology because they affect many minerals. Biogeochemical cycles are also important for life because sulfur is an essential element, being a constituent of many proteins and cofactors, and oxidants or sulfur compounds can be used as oxidants or reductants in microbial respiration. The global sulfur cycle involves the transformation of sulfur species through different oxidation states, which plays an important role in both geological and biological processes. How do humans impact biogeochemical cycles? Human activities have greatly increased carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere, nitrogen level in the biosphere, and also altered biogeochemical cycles combined with climate change increase the vulnerability of biodiversity, food security, human health, and water quality to a changing climate. Importance of biogeochemical cycle. They are also important because they store elements and recycle them. Biogeochemical cycle enable the transfer of molecules from one locality to another. Biogeochemical cycle enable the transformation of nutrients from one to another form. The biogeochemical cycle facilitates the storage of elements, and the last is biogeochemical cycle assists the functioning of ecosystem.